All right, so just finished up Crusade and Revolution. End of turn 10 ended up being a Republican auto victory because they were at 24 morale points. I actually won with the Republicans, I think on turn 4 or 5, may have been turn 5, when I also had a Republican morale within the auto victory level. What I learned was that with the nationalists, you've got some vulnerable main cities, and main cities are cities that are worth more victory points than an average city. You can see there that's worth 2 victory points and morale points. They've got Saragossa there, which is pretty vulnerable because it's right on the front. Less vulnerable is Sevilla, but that ends up being what ended up costing in the game. With the nationalists, I was not protecting. The first reason I lost, or the first time that I lost, was because I didn't protect Zaragoza over here, and I was too busy focused on Madrid and trying to get that push to get to Madrid. And the Republicans were able to kind of just buy time down here, and then ended up taking Zaragoza right before the end of turn 5, just to bump their morale up into that auto victory range. So I protected Saragossa more in subsequent turns. I didn't start over. I just unwound the taking of Saragossa there, so I wouldn't have to start the whole game over. I just unwound the taking of Saragossa and pretended that the Republicans hadn't taken it, which kept them out of the auto win zone, because I wanted to keep playing the game and get more turns in, to get more of a sense of how it actually played, to get out of the initial War of the Columns phase where you're limited to divisions, and at least get into the core combat once cores are introduced in the mobilization phase. So as it turns out, I didn't get out of the mobilization phase either, because I had another turn left of that before the final War of the Armies phase started. So, but I'm not going to continue playing at this point. I think I got a good experience of how the game plays. Ultimately, although the same thing undid my play as the nationalists that happened in the War of the Columns phase, which is that I was too busy focused on one thing, in this case, eradicating the Northern Front, which I successfully did with the nationalists, at the expense of leaving things too open down here around Sevilla. Initially, the nationalists had pushed the front to relieve Granada, which they did, and had pushed the front to here, but it had sat there static, and I had not, I'd moved all of the stuff that starts out over here and moved it all over towards Madrid. But Madrid had also sat there static while I focused on the Northern Front. And I decisively crushed the Northern Front, because when it's isolated, there's no way for the Republicans to relieve it, essentially. You can get various regional units, which are these units here that have the colored infantry symbol on them. You can get regional units in there, but no other types of units. So they are limited in what they can do. So as the Republicans, I kind of just abandoned it and let the nationalists roll over it. Although, I didn't, I didn't abandon it in terms of not defending the key spaces, which are, you can see Bilbao, Santander, and Gijón. I didn't totally abandon those important squares. I made the nationalists work for it, but I was also not, committing forces to try and link up, through the nationalist spaces there to try and link the Northern Front up. I was like, you know what? Let's make the nationalists take their time on that, and I'm going to focus on where I think potential nationalist weakness is, which was down here. So I built up, ran in replacement units, reinforcement units from Cartagena over, and kind of built this front up slowly, and then bam, steamrolled right to the nationalists used some reinforcements to drop reinforcements directly into Sevilla. I even entrenched them there, and it was not enough to stop the Republican onslaught that ended up taking Sevilla. And the other thing that the nationalists really have to watch out for is giving up cheap victory points, which is something that happened over here on this front, where they were able to defend Saragossa effectively, but the Republicans were able to push in and grab a cheap victory point from Teruel, and then the same thing down here when they took Granada back, and I think they already had Jaén already, but they got victory points off Granada, they got victory points off Cordoba, they got victory points off of Huelva, Cadiz, and Sevilla itself, which was worth 2. And at the time, I had played one of these strategic counterattack cards, which if they take a target, they get an additional morale point from that, and used that to great effect when I took Sevilla, which gave me 3 morale points for it instead of 2. So, you know, it's not just this main city that's a problem for the nationalists to defend. It's that they've got 3 victory point locations and Malaga as well, which they had taken and the Republicans took back. So there's a lot of victory point / morale point cities that can change hands down here, making this, the Nationals can't afford to ignore this front, which is what I ended up doing. And by the time I was able to put units into Sevilla, it was too little, too late. And also, it's disastrous if the Nationalists lose Sevilla down here, because this is their only supply source. This is the only place on this entire side of the map that they can bring in reinforcements. So all of their other supply sources are up here in Valladolid, Saragossa, La Coruña. So there's no good way for the Nationals to project in the south if they lose that supply source. So just poor decision making on my part with the Nationalists of being too focused on putting all of my power. I kept running reinforcements into La Coruña up here to hammer away at the northern front, and I came in from this side as well, bringing units from Saragossa up and squeezed the northern front and destroyed it. And that was worth 2 morale points, and that cost the Republicans 2 morale points. It was not nearly worth what I ended up giving down here in these kind of piecemeal morale points and victory points. And then up here, and there were some where I would kind of project down with the regional forces up here, where I could get, snag this victory point, put some of these victory points and a potential supply source in play, so the Nationalists had to respond. So I didn't leave the Republicans totally out on a limb up there. I did push with them a little bit to drag in, make the Nationals come in with more resources up there than they should have. So, it is one of those games where you can't do everything that you want to do every turn. You cannot really focus on a broad front strategy in the game, it seems to me, but you also do need to balance carefully where you're applying pressure versus where you are defending properly. And the Nationalists really do have, with Sevilla and Zaragoza up there, they do have some very threatened and exposed main cities. And when they lose those main cities, not only does it cost in terms of the, a 2 victory point, morale point swing instead of just 1, but it also eliminates supply sources for them and will hurt their replacement capabilities. So, all things to keep in mind. And, maybe I should have focused more on Madrid once I was into the mobilization phase, but Madrid was well entrenched at that point. I was able to play the Iron Belt plans to get the trench out of Bilbao, so I made a move on Bilbao earlier on rather than going for Madrid. But, maybe it would have been differently if I'd focused more on Madrid and kind of left the northern front contained and pulled in nationalist resources from elsewhere. Don't know. I need to do some thinking, more thinking about how to apply the nationalists' superiority in military strength because it was definitely overwhelming on the Northern Front, but it was too concentrated and allowed the Nationalists to exploit elsewhere. So anyway, I really greatly enjoyed it, though. Loved the history of the game, the history of the cards and the events and all that stuff. Fascinating to read. The game, I felt the rules were very, very good. No, I didn't find any ambiguities. I didn't find any issues where I was like, "Wait, what happens if I do this?" The rules don't really say. I was always able to find exactly what I needed, exactly what answers I needed in the rules when I needed to find them. Lots of great, reminder counters and things like that. Very specific marker counters, more reminder counters over here about events and things that have happened that have cost one side or the other points. Very clear map, very good counters, very clear and effective. Great, this little thing here where you place what you're playing each action round, what activity you're doing for each action round, and how they're limited. Some are only available to choose once per turn. Others are available multiple times, but not in consecutive turns. It's all very clearly explained on there. Same thing, it's explained how limited units work and all that. So just a great piece of design work in general, with a very clear, concise, accurate map, with lots of great little helpful tables and trackers and things like that. So I always love that kind of stuff in a game. Really can't speak highly enough about how well polished this was, how much I enjoyed it. So I look forward to playing it opposed. Hopefully in the near future, we'll see. Just to get that experience on it. Obviously, a CDG playing solo, it's not going to be the same experience as if you're playing opposed. Although when you play these types of games solo, you just play your cards based on the fact that you don't know. Like, I have to play, thinking about what I'm going to play for this nationalist action round. I'm just making decisions based on the cards in my hand. You don't let the knowing, what the other side's cards are play into it. You would play it as though you don't know what's in the hand of the other side, and so you make the decisions with the information that you have and go from there. So I've never had a problem playing these solo, but obviously the experience is going to be different than if you're playing it opposed. So anyway, I have not figured out how to crack the game as the Nationalists at this point. I technically won twice with the Republicans. The first time, certainly just because I wasn't paying enough attention to what was really valuable on the board as the Nationalists, and the second time because I was just kind of too focused. And so I don't think you can be too singularly focused on any one front of the game. So anyway, really enjoyed it, and we'll probably look to play it again soon.